And a special good morning to you all out there. Happy Easter, Sunday, April 12th, and welcome to the second hour of Open Line. We call this our Open Line online stream. And on Easter, we do not take off. We are here, especially in this coronavirus COVID-19 epidemic here. So we have information for you. And of course, we have our regular roundtable and we have a special guest. So without further ado, let me introduce our team. First, let me start off with our brother, and I'm talking about our in-house sports reporter, and that is Brother Bobby Childs. Good morning, Brother Bobby.
Good morning, Fatim. Good morning, my colleagues and family members out there. I'll just start off by saying, my family is going through some mourning. It's been a rough week. I started the week losing my 54-year-old sister to COVID complications. And then week on Friday, as my niece, her oldest daughter, also passed away from COVID complications. So anybody out there who thinks it's a joke, anybody out there who feels as though they can't get it, not true. I'm actually living through it with my family right now. I take peace in knowing that they're at peace, and my focus right now is just shifting to my surviving niece who's 24, because it's been numbing to lose a mother and an older sister in the same week.
Yeah, our condolences to you, Brother Bobby. When you said last night that you wanted to come on, I didn't hesitate. And the reason why I didn't hesitate, because I remember when my father passed, and once the funeral service was over and we went back to the house for the repast, I just didn't feel like being there. And I wanted to go play softball, and my manager wouldn't let me play, but my mother saw how miserable I was. So she just told me at that particular time, my mother had just gotten out the hospital. So she just told me to just go ahead and leave. So I didn't hesitate, brother. And if this is therapeutic for you, my brother, we are here for you. So again, our heartfelt condolences to you, Brother Bob.
Thank you all.
Okay, all right, let me continue down and introduce the other half of our sports team, and that's the sports editor for the New York Amsterdam News, and that is our good brother, Jamie Harris. Good morning, Jamie. How are you today?
Good morning, family. Just staying in prayer, taking it one day at a time, empathizing with all the, our brothers and sisters of all persuasions, ethnicities who are dealing with this crisis. Obviously, it's a global crisis. Fatina, as you know, so many people that we know, our dear brother Bobby has been directly impacted, man. So, certainly empathy and sympathy and prayers out to everyone, man, and trying to just do my part to help anyone and everyone that I can.
All right, thank you. I also want to introduce, I call him Brother Protest, and that's out of love for this brother. He's been doing that a long time, and I'm talking about the chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, and I'm talking about our good brother, Larry Ham. Good morning, Brother Larry. How are you, my brother?
Good morning, Fatim, and let me say happy Easter to everybody, and a joyous and kosher Passover, and greetings to our brothers and sisters as they enter the season of Ramadan. Let me extend my condolences to Brother Bobby on his loss. I can't imagine how it feels to lose two family members in the same week, two very immediate family members in the same week. And also I want to extend my condolences to the family of Minister ABDUL HAFEEZ Muhammad, who I knew very well. And
hold up, brother. I want to do that properly. So give us a minute. I want us all to do that, my brother. All right. And let me introduce one of our guests. We are waiting for another guest. If he pops in, we will introduce. If not, we are rolling on with the show. And I'm talking about my good sister, our good sister, a family member here, and that is Tamika Mallory. She is the co-founder of Until Freedom, as well as the co-founder of the Women's March. Good morning, my sister Tamika.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much, Fatine, for inviting me to be with you all today. It's, obviously, as you said, we'll talk a little bit later. It's a somber time for so many people, so much pain, but also we know that as we are on Easter Sunday, there is some story that we are all going to be able to tell after this is over that will make our world a better place and strengthen our children. And so we're all just looking for whatever that may be. And I'm happy to be here to share with you all.
Okay, thank you. I want to kick it back out to Larry Ham in a few minutes. He just disappeared for a quick minute. But as he was mentioning, and we're going to take a moment to just chime in, because usually the first Sunday of the month, we would see in the studio and in the hallways here, Minister Dr. ABDUL HAFEEZ Muhammad, who was the East Coast Regional Representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam. And Minister HAFEEZ, he has been known for over 30 plus years here in the city, in the tri-state area and across the country. And this brother was a tireless brother. I remember meeting him when I was with Reverend Sharpton, attorney Alton Maddox, and attorney C. Vernon Mason, when I was with the United African Movement, and then continued on with Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network. And at that particular time, Minister HAFEEZ was Minister Kevin Muhammad. And it was so good to see young brothers, and I'm talking about at that particular time, Minister Conrad Muhammad, so many young brothers in the Nation of Islam, and also in other leadership across the city, in movements trying to make a difference. So Brother Larry, as you started, I'm gonna kick it back to you, my brother, as you had just started to talk about Minister HAFEEZ Muhammad. I'll let you start it off, my brother.
Yes, I learned of the passing of Minister ABDUL HAFEEZ Muhammad early yesterday morning. I actually think the first one to actually put up a Facebook post that I saw was Brother Bashir Kenyele, who you know, Fatine, and
Yes.
that might have actually been almost like in the wee hours of the morning of Saturday morning. And then I saw other posts that other people put up. And at first, I couldn't believe it. I thought people were just posting pictures, of themselves together with Minister Muhammad. And then as I read into it, I found out he had passed away. And it was astounding to me because we, you, he, I, Bobby, Jamie, we were in the lobby of the studios having conversations. It couldn't have been more than a month ago. With Minister Muhammad. And so it was hard for me to grasp. And then it came right on the heels of the news of the passing of Bobby's sister and his niece, his sister's daughter. And I was just devastated. I really liked and loved Minister Muhammad. He was an outstanding representative of Minister Louis Farrakhan. Minister Louis Farrakhan couldn't have had a finer representative in this area. The brother was a good brother. I mean, beyond just, being the minister, he was a good brother, and his goodness came through upon meeting him. He was a good, sincere, kind brother, never had a bad word, always polite and uplifting in his conversation. He was not a brother that, like, if I saw him coming down the hall, I might duck into the office. When I saw Minister Muhammad, is just, I was glad to see that brother. And plus, he was a wise man whose opinions I upheld in high regard. So he is going to be missed. I'm going to miss him personally. The community is going to miss his presence, and may Allah be pleased with him.
Thank you. I want to, before I bring in our two panelists, I want to go to our sister, Tamika Mallory. Tamika, you have worn numerous hats out here, dealing with the National Action Network and other organizations. And I know you've gotten a chance to work and converse with Minister Dr. ABDUL HAFEEZ Muhammad. Your thoughts this morning on his passing?
Wow. Well, first of all, Minister HAFEEZ was my friend. And I think that's the first thing I want to start with, is that he was my friend. And I wrote on my Facebook page yesterday that he was someone I could count on. And I think, you know, folks who understand the depth of that, when you say that you could count on someone, that really matters, because it is rare that someone in your life, you know, especially not a family member, is dependable, you know, always present, always kind and supportive. Those things are qualities in a friend that everyone needs. And he was that. I went back in my in my text messages, just to look at some of the messages that he and I would share. And I in April of 2016, I sent him, that's how far I went back. I sent him a message and I said, "My dear brother and friend, I need you once again. You know, would you please help me with something?" And he didn't hesitate to say, "Yes, I'm going to be there." And the reason why that's significant to me is because when people die, everyone becomes your friend. You know, right. We were friends and we were together, you know, because everybody knows the other person is not there to tell the truth, right? Mm-hmm. So people do that. But even in our conversations for over the years, I would call him my friend. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, I hope, and I certainly will be a part of it. And as Larry has already said, that the story will be told how much of a dynamic leader he was. How he was present on issues, all types of issues. We could always depend on Minister HAFEEZ to show up and to be in the midst with any fight that had to do with the oppression of Black people, period. He loves Black people. And that's something that means a lot to me. And I think the third thing, the way I found out about his passing was my friend, my son, Lennon, who's my partner in Until Freedom and other ventures. He was the one who contacted me, and he was very, very upset. And the reason why that's significant is because younger people loved him, and they also could count on him to be present. One of the last times that we stood together, it was during my son's march in the Bronx, Kings Stop Killing Kings, where we walked down Grand Concourse from the beginning to the end, protesting and really raising the awareness about gun violence to our people. And Minister HAFEEZ was there. He's always there. And so, you know, long live his legacy, his memory, and certainly my condolences to his family and to the entire nation of Islam, because we all have lost a gem.
Jamie?
I can't really add much more to what Larry and Tamika said. You know, Larry used the word goodness. And every time I was in the presence of Brother HAFEEZ, you know, I felt his goodness. And the brother, you know, was dynamic. As Larry said, just a exemplary leader and representative of Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. You know, the brother truly loved our people, but he loved humanity. And, you know, if you did not agree with his positions, which almost always I did, you have to respect, and people, I think, respected the fact that he was fair, he was objective, and he had a love for humanity. And so it's a huge loss for Team, huge loss, man. Bobby informed me, we were having a conversation last night. I was just, you know, floored. And again, it just speaks to COVID and it's just devastating disease. And how it is ravaging, you know, globally, the global community, but particularly we know the Black community. We lost a great leader. We lost a great brother, a great sports fan. You know, I enjoyed some of our exchanges with Teen. I remember the show that we did, Super Bowl, when Atlanta played New England, and Brother HAFEEZ and I and Bobby, we were, you know, just so passionate about the, you know, the conversation and getting home later that day and watching the game. He just was, you know, a Renaissance man in many respects, man. And so, you know, my thoughts and prayers again go out to the entire nation, Brother HAFEEZ's family. Tamika, you know, your loss, obviously you were very close with them. Same to you, Larry. And, you know, just great brother, and, you know, much love, man, much love.
Brother Bobby.
Yeah, you know, again, everything that has been said is I co-sign big time. The two words that always came to mind when I was around Minister Muhammad, wisdom and perspective. And so while he was a representative of the Nation of Islam, I never felt as though he was trying to convert you. He was just having conversations to share perspective. And it was such a wise perspective. And he had this ability just to know a little bit about you, to position his words in that just resonated with me. So every conversation we had, you know, I'm sitting there saying, this is like great for me, because I'm going to pick up some nuggets of wisdom from someone. And his views were so broad, but he had some depth to every position that he took on it, right? So it is a great loss. You know, I know there are some folks who are not, who have some negative views around the Nation of Islam. But when you talk to him, I mean, that never entered into, it shouldn't enter into anyone's mind, period. But talking to Brother HAFEEZ, it just never hit me. You know, I was just talking to a wise man. So.
Well, you know, for me, I mean, I don't want to go on and on, because the words that were echoed by the panel here, and I know the relationship when Minister HAFEEZ walked in this building, walked on the floor in the studio, and as you both, Bobby and Jamie, said, of the relationship that you just join right in there, and whatever the topic could be, you know, sports or whatever. He just joined right in. A lot of people didn't know that he had a swag about him, you know, and we would, you know, pull each other's coattail, you know, that we both from the Borough of Brooklyn. We both graduated out of George Westinghouse High School, downtown Brooklyn. And for me, I remember when Minister HAFEEZ was on another radio station. And that's when we were at 98.7 KISS FM, and he was at Power 105, and he had a talk show, and I would call him up and say, hey, Minister, A, B, C, D, E, F, you know, and we would converse, because this is the kind of love that this brother had, you know. And last week when I reached out to him, I didn't hear back from him, and that was a little unusual. I know that he could get busy, but he would text me back or he would call me back, and I felt it was a little strange. But since we were in the midst of this crisis and we had a full packed show, I said, okay, I'll reach out to him later. And then, of course, I went on to Facebook and I saw Minister Ishmael Muhammad from Chicago, from Mas Mariam, and he stated that Minister HAFEEZ was battling COVID, the coronavirus, and he was ill. So I just prayed for him. And then Thursday came up, and I reached back out to Minister HAFEEZ. I dialed him on his cell phone and no answer. So I decided to call him at home. I didn't realize, but when I called him on his cell, I realized I had his home number. So I called, I believe that was his wife or his daughter that I spoke with. And I said that, you know, I was just checking on him, and I just was calling to offer my prayers. And what was said to me was that that's what is needed, because this is a very challenging time. I didn't push no more, because I know that this is a very hard time for so many people. We are seeing every time we log on to Facebook or we speak with someone, we find out that someone is sick or we lost someone. I mean, just this past Wednesday, we had a brother on, Principal Baruti Kefele, who was blessed, who not blessed to catch the virus, but was blessed to survive the virus, and to hear how violent the things that he went through. But for Minister HAFEEZ, you know, a down to earth brother. I was also touched by a person that wrote on my Facebook yesterday that he came to our aid of a sister who was going to be robbed and jumped. And her car was going to be robbed. And she said he came out of nowhere and helped calm the situation. And she did not get robbed, and she was able to keep her car, and Minister HAFEEZ squashed the situation. That's the kind of credibility he had. He had not only with righteous folks, but he had that kind of credibility when he went into the jails with the brothers on the streets that some folks could not even approach. He had that type of relationship with them, and this, when I got the message, Reverend Sharpton called me yesterday and told me, and he asked me to confirm it. And of course, as soon as I went on Facebook, I saw Sister Naya Arende from the Amsterdam News, if she's still there, posted it. And then of course from there, I put, like I said this morning on Open Line, I put on the tie. It's not a bow tie, but I said, let me put on a tie. And as I was tying my tie this morning, I was crying. And I was crying because I was just thinking about Minister HAFEEZ and the conversations that we had, and just the smile. And then, when we greet one another and how we greet one another, with that greeting, assalamu alaikum, and that brotherly hug. And that's something that I'm just going to miss. And as I was tying my tie, I just started to cry. And I didn't want to cry, to the point I awakened my wife this morning because, I didn't want her to, but I just was touched. And I'm not, as a man, I am not scared to shed tears, because I'll shed tears. I would have shed a lot more for this brother, because this brother put his life on the line for his family. He put his life on the line for even people he did not know. He was a genuine brother. You don't meet too many brothers. And out of the leadership, there's been a lot of leadership that came out of Mosque number 7, from Minister Conrad Muhammad, even the late Minister Khalid Muhammad, Minister Ben Chavis Muhammad. There's a lot of leadership that came out of Mosque number 7 and Mosque 7C in Brooklyn. And they've all embraced me, but there was no one that embraced me the way that Minister HAFEEZ embrace me. And he's definitely going to be missed. And like I said, just like you all have said, what more can you say? Because brother, it was just an embodiment of love and justice. So that's how I leave it with brother this morning. Mm. All right, team. I just want to also say, and we talked about Bobby, Tamika, just to throw it to you. I know you've had some challenging moments for dealing with your moms, and I know that you shared some of it, not everything, on social media. Is there any message that you would like to give to, because you have a very large following? How is your mom doing?
My mom is doing okay. She's it's a difficult situation, because when people who understand that she was in a coma and now she's out of the coma, they have this impression that, well, your mom is doing better and it's good, but my mom is paralyzed, and half of her body, she's paralyzed. The other half, she did not lose mobility for, but it is very weak. And so she really is in a very challenging situation. And people who know my mom know that she's a mover and shaker. She was the dance instructor for many classes in her community. She has videos online. One of them went viral, has 80 million views. And so my mom, this is a real challenging thing for us. And when we talk about Minister HAFEEZ, what I shared yesterday was that Brother Hassan Muhammad and Minister HAFEEZ arranged for me to be picked up from the airport when I was coming back from Mexico. My mother's stroke happened while I was away on a women's empowerment trip. In fact, and I've had to work through the grief of not being home when this took place, because I decided to stay for 2 days after the women left, just to kind of hang out, by myself, really to be, at peace with myself there in Mexico. And, I got a call from my sister at 4 p.m. on the day that my mom's stroke occurred. It was too late for me to get home. So I sat through the night struggling, you know, with not being with my family. My mom was responding at the time, you know, after her stroke, but by that evening she went into the coma. And it was a tough night. The next morning, you know, when you arrive, and I don't, you know, just for anyone who's ever been through anything like this, when you arrive in a city, and the first thing I did was open up my Facebook page when I landed and saw that my father, if you know Stanley Mallory, he's not an alarmist. He's a cool cat. You know, he's a cool cat. He doesn't want anybody to be worried. He's always trying to keep everybody calm. And for him to post on his Facebook to a broad audience, I need you to pray for my wife. She's in the hospital and she's in bad shape. It just tore me to pieces. And so being in an Uber would not have been the best place for me to have to experience all of that. But Minister HAFEEZ and Brother Hassan had someone there to pick me up, to bring me to my mother. And, you know, some people might say, okay, it was a car, it was transportation. But if you know, if you love your mother and your mom has had a stroke and you know she's in a coma, having someone there that you trust to take you to her is something that you'll never forget. And I will never, ever forget that he saw it not robbery to ensure that I arrived safely. And of course, he called me, prayed with me. He called several days after. And I just love him for that, you know. And when you know, thinking of what's happening with my mom, on more than one occasion, we've had a COVID scare with her inside of the rehabilitation center where she is. Other people around her have been infected. And just to give you a scope of it, when I asked the center, if she has it, when you test her, if it comes back positive, what is going to happen? Because remember, we can't see her, right? Because all in this state, in New York State, you cannot visit anyone in a hospital, a nursing home, or a rehabilitation center unless, in some cases, they are on their last leg, and you know, death is imminent, or the person had a baby and only the parent can visit. And I've heard that there's been issues even with that. So we're not able to visit my mother, this woman who went from complete mobility to being paralyzed. We've not been able to see her. Very difficult. And so I asked, what will happen? Will she be isolated? How will it be handled? And they told me that there was no more space to isolate anyone, that all the isolation areas in their hospital and in the rehabilitation center were taken because of the amount of patients that they have there. That's what we're dealing with. And, you know, being in a rehabilitation center or a nursing home, and even in some cases a hospital, is a death sentence, particularly for Black people right now. And it's a very, very scary time.
Tamika, I just want to say, Tamika, we're keeping you and your mother and your family in our prayers. This must be a very difficult situation for you, and we pray for the best outcome.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
I want to say to you, Sister Tamika, my mother had 3 strokes, and they were spaced out. And the first stroke that my mother had, I had just pretty much graduate college. And when I got that call, I was at work. And, you know, that was one of the longest train rides because I didn't know what to expect. And of course, when I got there, my mother wasn't paralyzed, but her speech was gone. Her speech was gone. I believe my mom stroked on her, yes, she stroked on the left side of the brain, so her right side of the body was affected. So she wasn't paralyzed, but she was definitely weak. She could not speak. My mother could not speak. She went to one therapy session. She was like, my mother's from the South, the old school South. I ain't going. She wrote it down. I'm not going back to no therapy. I'm not doing this. But, you know, somebody brought a Bible over to her, and she would just read the Bible. And I'll say about 7 or 8 months went by, and one day she was in the kitchen cooking some grits. And I always tell the story, you know, and, you know, she yelled out, I ain't gonna tell you the name because it was one of my nicknames, but she called me by my nickname. She said, come over here and get these grits. You talking about somebody that fell out the bed, you know, because my mother couldn't speak. And that was the beginning of her recovery. She was starting to recover. And what happens is with a stroke, and is that you have a bleed. You have a bleed in the brain, and as time goes by, and as that sometimes the area that was affected is not affected no more. So I just say with power of prayer,
yes,
Tamika, and and I just say that is encouraging. And with the second stroke, my mother, she had in the emergency room at Kings County Hospital, and it took her speech again. It took her speech, but it only took her speech for about 15-20 minutes, and then everything came back. And then she had they said a massive stroke. It's a long story on that, but and that's the one that took out. But she did live some years after, and she was very productive. So I'm just saying that is something encouraging to you, Sister Tamika.
And my mom definitely did not lose her speech, because she is giving orders from her rehabilitation bed.
Right. So our prayers are there. I see our other guest on. I don't see his face yet, but I see him up there, and hopefully he can connect his video. And I'm talking about the Brooklyn Borough President, and that is our good brother, Eric Adams. As I just stated, he is the president of the Borough of Brooklyn, a former New York State Senator, retired captain of the New York Police Department. And when I mentioned, and when we spoke about the passing of Minister HAFEEZ Muhammad, and I said that me and Minister HAFEEZ and a couple other people, famous people, Biggie Smalls, the rapper, and Busta Rhymes, and I think Jay-Z, we all went to Tony Herbert, all went to Westinghouse. I don't know what it was about George Westinghouse, downtown Brooklyn. But I think of you, Brother Eric, when I think of Westinghouse, because when I first met you, brother, you was working for the transit police, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And I believe your headquarters was right there in J Street train station, and Sister Tamika and the rest of the panel, that's where I got a chance to meet Erica Ford on the day of outrage upstairs near there. So it was meant to be for all of us to meet. Yes. But Brother Eric, before we get into our conversation, your words about our late great brother, Minister Dr. ABDUL HAFEEZ Muhammad.
Just a solid brother, and I know oftentimes after people transition from the physical to the spiritual, they try to find creative ways to talk about an individual's life, but you don't have to do it on this case. This brother was a soldier, and he was consistent on the journey of just uplifting Black people, and we had a real relationship many times. I think about throughout the journey of knowing him. There were some scary moments for me, and no matter how brave we are, our bodies is, really different from our spirit. Our body still goes through the symptoms of fear, and I had those symptoms throughout my time in the police department when we started 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. Some of the fights we had, I remember reaching out to him at the time someone shot out my car windows, and that brother was just there and just told me to stay strong and just moving through the various battles that we had during that time. This was a different city, and many people believe the city we live in now was something that automatically materialized, but there were some real struggles. If you allow yourself the characteristic of reflection and start peeling back some of the pages of the times and events that we had to encounter, those years during Giuliani when he was here, the end of the Koch years, the struggle during the Dinkin years, and coming even up into the Bloomberg years. And this brother was solid, he was committed, he was dedicated, and he filled whatever position he had to fill. You could call on him and didn't bring all of those personalities of, why am I doing this? Or this is too small for me or too large for me. He just did the task. And we're going to miss that brother. And every day when I wake up, I look at my phone and I'm hearing of another name, Roy Hastick, to mention and think of, and just the continuous number of names that this virus is really prematurely robbing from us. And so we just have to stay true. And he's gone physically, but the brother's still spiritually with us. And the mission continues and the job continues. And we're going to continue even after this coronavirus issue is over.
All right, thank you, brother. Brother Eric Adams, and as our brother here, and you know, just since you're joining us, we've been touched here. Our own Bobby Childs, who's joining us today, he lost his sister this week to the coronavirus. She was 54 years old, and then her oldest daughter, his niece, succumbed to the virus, I believe, Friday. So it's touching a lot of us. So when we talk about these numbers, when we mention these numbers and you hear it in the media, these are attached to real people.
Yes.
You know, people are mourning. There's a lot of times you can't even have the proper burial or the funeral because of gathering and the crisis that's going on. But I want to throw out some numbers, but it's something that me and Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams talked about last night, and I want to bring it to the panel, and I want him to kind of kick this off, because this is very important. And I told him that I would make sure that we spent time having a conversation about this. And first of all, as of yesterday, the coronavirus death toll climbed here in America above Italy. And now America has the highest tally on the planet. By yesterday afternoon, America's outbreak had taken the lives of more than 20,000 folks. Italy's dark days death toll stood at 19,468. As we all know, that New York is the epicenter here in the United States with this outbreak, and it has seen statewide the fatality count rise above 8,000 folks. And the news that Governor Cuomo brought up yesterday, he stated that more than 700 deaths have been occurring daily. And he announced again yesterday, 783 folks passed in 24 hours between Friday and Saturday. We also got the numbers midweek here in New York City, because we were hearing that this COVID-19 coronavirus was affecting and attacking more people of color. And I believe it was Wednesday when New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio came out with some statistics, and he basically was saying that the coronavirus was attacking and was twice as deadly for Black and Latino people than white folks here in New York City. If you look at the preliminary death rate for Hispanic people in this city, it's about 22 people per 100,000. Following that, it was Black people, where it was 20 per 100,000, then white folks at 10 per 100,000, and then the rate of Asian people is about 8 per 100,000. It's something that they may know that we don't know. We do know that in China that they did suffer in the past from MERS and SARS, but they seem to be able to deal with this coronavirus a little bit better this time than how they dealt with this in the past. If you go and look at the death in Louisiana, in Milwaukee, in Chicago, in these urban cities, you see that is more than twice the number of people of color that are affected to this. But what Brother Eric brought up to me, and I want you to get into this, Brother Eric, is you mentioned to me yesterday about essential personnel and non-essential personnel. And you was mentioning how, and I want you to break this down, is how it seemed that Black and brown folks were put out to slaughter. Because as you start to look at, as you said, the essential personnel could have been a code word for white folks, you know, and the essential personnel, as you look at that, is your folks that are Black and Hispanic. And you are seeing the tremendous number of those folks being affected by this coronavirus. So I throw it to you to kick this off, my brother, because the information you brought was so important. And like you said, you don't want to wait till this is over. You want to bring this up now.
Right, no, so true. And if you go back to your show, and over a month ago, you know, there was a serious hit on me in the New York Post when I started having this conversation. As soon as I heard the mayor and the governor used the term essential personnel and non-essential personnel, I said, that's code. That's code for dividing the cities between the haves and haves not. And, you know, there's some Black folks and Hispanic folks who fall into the population of non-essential personnel. These are people who can do their job via telecommuting. But the overwhelming number of non-essential essential personnel are those who are affluent and those who are white, those who are managers, those who can actually do their jobs from home. Essential personnel are those that cannot. The correction officers, the 9/11 operators, but predominantly Black and Hispanic. Transportation, predominantly Black and Hispanic. The grocery store clerk that put the broccoli on the shelves, predominantly Black, Hispanic, and poor. So the large population of non-essential personnel, they're Black and Hispanic and poor. Over 70% of the people who are non-essential personnel are Black, Hispanic, and poor. So we said to them, you are going to go out and you're going to run this city while the 30% of us are out of the danger zone. We're going to shelter in place or hit pause button, whatever terminology you want to use from the governor and the mayor. And this is all over the country. You're going to be removed from danger while we're going to have our train operators operate the city. We're going to have our essential personnel that they will do the physical jobs of be on the train system. We're going to have our correction officers and prisoners be in close proximity in the jails, Rikers Island, and other locations. We're going to have our food service workers in schools all do this. So now that in itself is wrong. But then take it to the next level. They said that it is dangerous for you to be out there, but we're going to put you out there and not give you any PPEs, personal protection equipment. We're going to make it illegal for you to even wear it. If you're an ACS employee, we're going to write you up. We're not going to give it to you if you're transit employees. Over 40 transit employees have died. We're not going to give you the personal protection equipment. And the argument that we all bought into, they made it into a narrative, is that, okay, the reason you're not getting the personal protection equipment as this grocery store clerk, because there's not enough, and there needs to be enough for our first line employees, which are our doctors and nurses. That is a lie. I said it, and I've been saying this continuously. There is no global shortage of personal protection equipment. Every non-essential employee should have been given PPEs. If you're sending them out there into the lion's den, you should have been giving them the protection. And there is no global shortage. So we had the top executives in the country saying there's enough PPEs in these various institutions, although we weren't giving them to the non-essential employees. We said there was enough. But when I go visit my hospitals and talk to my doctors and my nurses, you're supposed to wear a mask one time according to the infectious disease control ruling. When you walk into a room and a person has an infectious disease, you're supposed to discard the mask that you're wearing. They are wearing it for a week. They are not having enough supplies on the ground. The heads of the hospitals are being forced by the executives of the city that you better not complain. Any of your personnel that talks out about this, they're going to be reprimanded. And so our fight has been, through my sister city agreements, I've been able to speak in China. I have several sister cities in China from my visits to China, and they reached out and I reached out. We have been able to get thousands of pieces of personal protection equipment and identify distributors who can get tens of millions of pieces of personal protection equipment in this city every week. Stefan Marbury and others and other companies and corporations. But the lack of movement, the bureaucracy that's attached to procurement that is not getting this on the ground. And you say, well, why is that? Because the people who have make the decisions of procuring this, they're telecommuting. They know nothing about what's on the ground. They don't see the urgency of the grocery store clerk. They don't see the urgency of the correction officer who sued to get PPEs inside their facilities in the city hall, then appealed their suit. So what you are seeing, over 60% counted, and those numbers are going to go up because we didn't count everyone. Over 60% are Black and brown. If you look at the strip of real estate where the deaths are coming from, you will see Black and brown community, and you clearly see the strip where you see little or no cases are coming from. Those are the places where folks are telecommuting at home. So we told Black and brown people in this city, you go out and service us. You make sure our trains are on time. You make sure our Uber Eats are delivered to our home. You make sure that our broccoli is in our stores. You send your cousins, your aunts, your sisters, your brothers, and you go out and service our city, and then we'll deal with it later. Lastly, we knew from China that people with pre-existing medical conditions are more likely to have fatalities. We already know the mapping of that. We already know where the largest numbers of diabetes, largest number of asthma, the largest number of respiratory conditions. We already know those numbers. We have not heard at one time during this entire pandemic, that there was a plan in place to go to those communities and prepare them and make sure the infrastructure was there to do the testing, to identify clusters. We under-tested in our community. We had no plan to deal with people with pre-existing conditions who were more likely to be hospitalized and more likely to lose their lives. We did nothing towards that. We basically said there would be some casualties. Those casualties would be in the 80% pool of people, 20% would cycle out, and those 80% are predominantly Black, Hispanic, and poor. And that is the real crisis on what happened in this city. It wasn't a pandemic that was the crisis, it was our response. And it was a calculative position that there would be losses. You heard that from the beginning, and you still hear it, that there will be losses. It's time for us now to right-size this ship, change the direction that it's going to save lives of our family members. Because these are our family members that we are losing, and we have to change this direction.
We have two people here that heads up, civil and human rights organizations. I want to start with you, Tamika. Your thoughts on this, and how do we deal with this?
Well, I don't have much to say to follow up, what our borough president, Eric Adams, has said. I think he gave us a full scope. And, unfortunately, we can't hit the streets, right, to mobilize by showing up outside of the mayor's office or the governor's office, which, by the way, let me just say, because I really want to say it publicly, I have been very disturbed by the number of people who are so excited about Governor Cuomo's leadership. And I'm talking about our people, even some of the folks who are in the struggle with us have been posting and talking about, President Cuomo, while he also is engaged in this budget that was put forth that cut resources and benefits for our communities. How can you be in the middle of a pandemic and also cut Medicaid at the same time? How can you be this presidential leader and not be concerned about what's happening in the prisons here in New York State, and how we release people or deal with the safety of people who are locked up, whether that be correction, whether that be people who are incarcerated, and or the correction officers as well, and administration and staff. We have some serious crises happening in the state, and Governor Cuomo goes on TV, and because he's a good communicator, people somehow believe that means he is, the second coming of Christ. Unfortunately, when you see him standing against Trump every day, you're drawn to a great communicator who's charismatic. We know he's smart, and we know that Governor Cuomo is a leader. How he uses his leadership is very abusive at times to people of color. And I think that we need to be very careful not to be tricked by what we see on TV, but to pull back the curtains and see what's going on, what's going on behind them. So that's what I will say on that. But as I said, this idea of organizing, we have to think of new ways to do that. And, one of the things that I think is important is that, as I was listening to Eric speaking, I'm thinking I also had a conversation with Michael Blake yesterday where he was talking about some of the same things. And he is an assemblyman from the Bronx. We have to get all of our elected officials, we as individuals have to put pressure on every single elected official that is in our communities. They can't be home chilling out right now. They have to actually work on this issue. We need the data. That's number one. Actual data from the governor and the mayor about what is happening. I heard, Eric, you had some great points this morning that I did not know existed, but I know that the overall data from the state, people are trying to get that. Jamani Williams, our public advocate, has been talking about it. So first of all, we need the data. And then we have to be insistent that our elected officials do what is necessary to ensure that the resources come to our communities to address these issues. We need testing. I watched a Black woman, and I have to go after I say this, but I watched this Black woman say last night that her sister went to the hospital 3 times to try to get tested 3 times. And after the 3rd time that she was not tested and was sent home with all of these different reasons why she may or why she was sick. The last time they finally intubated her because she was at the point where she really could not breathe. And within hours, her sister died. A poor Black woman. And she said that this is what is happening out here. They're telling you they're testing people. They're not testing our folks. They're testing tigers at the Bronx Zoo. That's what they're doing. So we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to stay. Don't be at home on vacation. Get on the phone with your elected officials, email them, send them notices, and make sure that they understand that you are paying attention and that we need each one of them to push our government to do what is right for our people.
Well, Mika, just to add, it is unconscionable that in this country, the United States of America, less than 1% of the people in this country have been tested. That is inexcusable and unconscionable, Tamika. You are absolutely correct.
Yes, well said, well said. And sister, you're right. Jamani and I have been speaking routinely about this, and I really want to take my hat on. I'm glad you mentioned him on the consistency in which Jamani has really touched on this conversation and the lack of testing. Every 2 weeks, I have a conference call with all of my doctors in Brooklyn, the presidents of my hospitals. And they shared with me a month ago when we did this show. It was so important that we did this show for Team almost a month ago.
Yes.
And they shared with me, they said that, Eric, this was when the Department of Health, and those are the numbers we need also. This is very important. We need the Department of Health to give us the numbers of the early testing. They said, Eric, when a person came to our facility with all of the symptoms, and we tested them, and it wasn't flu, it wasn't emphysema, and any other things. Then the Department of Health, the CDC stated you're supposed to test them for coronavirus. They said for every 10 people that came to us to be tested for coronavirus, only 1 was approved, 9 was disapproved and sent back home. So when you think about it, the numbers we see are underreported. They are telling me we should be testing the clustered zip codes so we can start identifying and then airdropping resources in those communities to make sure that people are getting the amount of testing that they should in those areas, the resources, a real plan. Because we got to fight this virus on 2 fronts. You know, intervention, those who are in the hospital, and then prevention. We have to prevent people from getting it in the first place. Right. That is why when you think about pre-existing condition, asthma, over 60, respiratory issues, you just described NYCHA. That's why I'm in NYCHA handing out masks and giving them information, because people basically said, listen, we're gonna write these folks off. That is what this fight is about. And we gotta energize and mobilize those of us who can get on the streets. And then lastly, my brothers who are strong warriors, this is Zulu Nation time. You know, we got elders who are locked in their home. If you don't have a pre-existing health issue, you need to put on a mask, put gloves on, and we need to go check on these elders. We need to make sure we're providing food to our elders. We need to do these errands. You know, I'm tired of seeing these young white kids showing up at Borough Hall asking me, how do I go into Brownsville to service Black elders in our community. This is our time. We don't call ourselves warriors after this is over. You're not a warrior because you have the ability to tweet. Those young brothers who are, as I said to my son, you need to, I'm not going to put you in harm's way, but we cannot watch the death of our people. We are supposed to be on the front line. This is where we're supposed to be. And I agree with Tamika. We got those of us. Now listen, if you have a pre-existing condition, I got it. But if you are a healthy, strong Black man, you need to put on your shield and your gear, and you need to get out there because our people are dying right now in the street. And you need to be part of this movement. And every day, I spent the last 17 days sleeping in my office, getting up early in the morning, energizing, and every day being out there in my community. And I want to see my brothers out there with me. We got to fight this together. This is real what we're talking about. We're losing lives every day.
There's two things. Larry, you're on mute, Larry. Larry, you're on mute. There were two things. There were two things I just wanted to build off of, right?
I just want to say I love you all.
Okay, thank you, Tamika.
Bobby, my love to you.
Thank you, and hopefully your mom is back dancing again real soon.
Exactly, and Tamika, I'm gonna reach out to you. I want you back on on-air show and back on the stream. Okay?
Please, would love to. Thanks.
Take care, sister. Be strong. Stay strong.
So there's two things that Eric and Tamika brought up. So last week we actually talked about how we already have a poverty gap, and COVID is just going to make it even worse. And what Eric had talked about around the people being in essential roles, well, that's a byproduct of the poverty gap that we've had before. Why did the only job that person could get was putting the broccoli on the shelves, or not to diminish an MTA job, but that's the job they had. Even sanitation workers and everything. So you already had this poverty gap that put people in, ironically, essential jobs, but yet they don't get paid and taken care of as an essential person out there. And this is just exacerbating it even more. This is just going to make it, like I said last week, this is going to damage another set of generations because you're going to have people who have lives, and they were the major wage earner for that family. And we know when the wage earner disappears from the family, if it was already weak, it gets weaker out there.
That's so well said.
The second thing that Eric and Tamika brought up was around the supply chain, right? And I commend you, and Steph Marbury for being able to do it, right? But you go back into history, right? So during the Great Depression, there was all these stories about food not being available, but food was available, just like there's food available now. But the supply chains broke down, and you had farm owners who, because they could not get the dollar they wanted, instead of donating that food, they killed their flocks. They slaughtered animals. They grounded the food over and just said, well, let me just start growing it for next year. The same thing is happening now. People, stores for whatever reason have put a limit on the amount of milk somebody can buy, but dairy farmers are saying, well, we got to pour milk away. And that's a byproduct of you just don't have robust enough supply chains. What the federal government should have done with the Defense Production Act, they haven't done it. And where they have done some things, they have bypassed systems that have already worked. There are, Eric, I'm sure you may have run into it. You have some smaller suppliers been in the game for a while. So they say, I have a proven way to get product X to market Y. But now you have examples of the federal government coming in and saying, no, you can't do that anymore. We're taking over. And what they're doing is diverting those goods, and they're selling them at a higher premium. They're putting some in the stockpile, and they're going into the pockets of the Jared Kushner and his crew out there. So the way the supply chains, it was already screwed up when he put the trade embargoes in, because again, he didn't know what he was doing. And as I said before, he put Peter Navarro in place, who doesn't know what he's doing. So you already had a bad supply chain that disrupted the good parts of a supply chain. And then you put this pandemic in place, and it just makes it terrible for everybody right now.
As you and Eric stated, you know, this pandemic illuminates the socioeconomic ills of this country and society, and it also exposes the flaws of the architecture and infrastructure of the federal government. As Eric said, there's not a lack of PPEs. As Bob, as you pointed out, there's not a lack of food. It is a supply chain. It is the leadership from the top, starting at the White House, and how this is trickling down, and how it has created confusion even among state and local governments, because they're looking for leadership from the federal government from the very beginning, which they weren't given. So now it's brothers like Eric as a borough president who has to take the leadership to get out there to ensure that the people within his district, within the communities, are being served. And, you know, Sister Tamika brought up a great point. Sister Karina's Reyes, who was on with us Wednesday, said something that is really alarming. We have 13,000 people in New York City that have been listed as that have recovered from the coronavirus. With the state cuts in healthcare, we're talking about countless people. And when I say countless, because like Brother Eric said, we still don't have accurate numbers. People who have been infected with corona, who are going to recover and who are going to require long-term care. My concern is, how are people who are underinsured or who don't have insurance are going to pay for this? Are they going to get the proper care that they need? Because we may lose more lives of those who have recovered because they're not getting the proper care and can't afford it.
Yeah. Larry, I know you were trying to get in.
Yeah. Well, these problems are not going to be solved unless we have the adequate resources to solve them. We've had 3 emergency relief bills, also called stimulus, and the lion's share of those bills has gone to working on a 4th emergency relief bill or stimulus. But in the midst of this pandemic, they adjourned to go home. Now, if you look across the border at Canada, the Canadian Parliament is working through the pandemic. If you look across the Atlantic to Europe, parliaments in countries all over Europe are working through the pandemic. In the midst of this pandemic, in which 20,000 Americans have already died, any flu disease in our immediate contemporary memory here, our Congress adjourned and went home. Number one, our Congress should reconvene right now and continue and complete the work on this 4th stimulus bill. They must put more money in that bill. This bill needs to be a bailout for the people and not a bailout for the banks and the corporations. They must put more money in this 4th bill for state and federal governments so that they can do the things they need to do around this pandemic. They must put more money in this 4th bill for hospitals. Our hospitals don't have enough resources. Even in those hospitals where they may have adequate PPE, they are understaffed. The nurses, the non-medical professional staff are being worked to death right now. I know my daughter is a nurse. They're working 12, 16-hour, 18-hour shifts and exposing themselves to this disease and putting themselves in harm's way. So in this 4th package, we need more money for state and federal government. We need more money for our hospitals. We need not only money for testing. In the last emergency relief bill, so-called stimulus bill, they put money in for testing, but they didn't put money in so that people could get the medical care if they were tested and found to be positive with coronavirus. So what we need right now is a short-term Medicare for all to cover everybody's medical bills during this pandemic. That $1,200 a month they sent for that one-time $1,200, that's not enough. We need $2,000 a month for every worker to hold those workers in place so that their jobs will be there, so that they will be held harmless and their jobs will be there
once this pandemic is over. We need paid sick leave. We need hazard pay. We need more resources to urban communities where we know Black and brown people are suffering not just twice, up to 70% of the people are dying in many places are Black and other minority people. You know, and I want to say this, we all are cooperating as much as we can through this pandemic. But I'm going to tell you, if this continues where workers are not getting what they need to stay safe, and I'm not just talking about our hospital workers, I'm talking about our hospital workers, our transportation workers, our postal workers, and all the other workers, I'm telling you, people are going to rise up all over the world right now. People are going on rent strikes. There are wildcat strikes taking place. There was an uprising in a prison in the Midwest. Our prisons right now are kill boxes because most of them don't even have sinks that work. How can people wash their hands if the sinks don't work and they don't have water? The nonviolent, the aged, the sick, the infirm prisoners and other prisoners need to be released. In these detention centers, these privately owned detention centers, they're becoming kill boxes. The immigrant detainees that are nonviolent, they need to be released. And another thing that they're trying to do, we need to put more money in this fourth bill for the post office. Trump is trying to destroy the Postal Service. Why is he trying to destroy the Postal Service? Because he does not want vote by mail nationally. Right now, they're trying to break the post office by not refunding it. There need to be $25 billion need to be put in immediately to save the Postal Service.
Brother Larry, I got to jump in here. I got to jump in here because
all right.
I got to jump in here because I got to get a couple things in here. And you made some excellent points. Brother Eric, and I know you might want to respond to that, but there's three questions I have to you, Brother Eric. And you may not remember them. I'll repeat them. The first question is coming from Anthony Warren. He states his question is testing, about free testing. Do you have to have medical coverage or will they deny you because of no medical coverage? Is that one of the reasons they're turning people back? That's number one. Then number two, Priscilla Bryant is saying that when it deals with these essential workers, let's deal with the folks that are working with the people in the New York City homeless shelters. They need supplies for themselves and their clients. What can they do for that? And then number three, Eric, the mayor mentioned something about folks that are renters telling their landlords that they should use their security as their payment for April. Is that something that is mandated? How do a person that is a renter tell their landlord this in this circumstance? I know I hit you with three specific questions, but people need to know this information.
So true. Firstly, the essential employees in the homeless shelters, anyone who's classified an essential employee, we should not divide them up. You should not say an essential employees on this tier level, that a police officer or a hospital personnel. Essential is essential. And all of them should be treated the same way, and that includes hazard pay as well. But they should all get the tools they need to protect themselves, because just as hospitals are being exposed to people who are sick, those who are transit employees and drive the trains are being exposed also. So we should treat and give them the tools to protect themselves, and that include those who are delivering mail and homeless services. We've given thousands of masks to those who are in our shelters to help them. But this can't be Eric's flow of masks. I can only give masks in the thousands. Our city in our country can get hundreds of millions. So I'm really just putting my finger in the dike by answering some of the calls and my volunteer team that's delivering to different locations, but we need the real flow of tools and resources. And so as the person asked, yes, our homeless services, even our men and women who are homeless, they should have masks. because they're in close confinement. The question around testing, you could be tested if you have health insurance or not. Everyone should be allowed to be tested. If you go to a testing facility, we're finally getting one in Brooklyn. There's going to be a drive-through and a walk-through. Remember, Brooklyn had the first death. It has one of the largest population of people who have been diagnosed. We had a testing location in Staten Island, drive-through for a long time, almost a month. We have 2 in the Bronx. We have one that's open in Queens. And we're finally getting one in Brooklyn. The mayor and his team, they have moved away from testing altogether unless you are chronically ill, which is the wrong move. I don't know what the Department of Health is thinking about. It's the wrong way to go. And we believe that we should be testing, particularly in those cluster areas, so that we can get resources there. And I think the third thing, what was the third thing?
The third thing is Mayor de Blasio had said the folks in New York City that landlords should use those that are paying rent. Yeah.
Right. I was the pusher of this concept. What we're calling for is that we have to get past a 4-month cycle. They believe that that's the duration of it. So we need to survive a 4-month cycle. And when you look at that 4-month cycle, the largest bill many of us have is our rent bill or our mortgage payment. So we stated that we have almost $8 billion in the city that is used with one calls your month in advance, your security deposit. So we're saying to landlords and tenants to allow the tenants to get that security deposit back so they could use it for this emergency. Many people lost their jobs. They could use that emergency money, match with their stimulus money, the $1,000 per family, $500 for each child. Use that to get us through the month of April. Then do a rent freeze, a 90-day rent freeze, where you could have another 90 days, match that with the mortgage freeze, where your mortgage payment and utility freeze. So if by having government and banks hold off on the largest chunk of money that people pay, it gives them an opportunity to recover for the 4-month period. Everyone is in agreement with, as the sister was asking, or the person was asking about the month security, returning that to the tenants so that the tenants can put that money back into our community. That's $8 billion infusion of money, and allows us to get over this first month and then continue to get over the next 3 months. That it gives us an opportunity to catch our breath and infuse money into our in our city. We bailed out the banks when they went through difficult time. Now it's time for the banks to bail out the people during this time. Everyone is going to feel some pain, but if we spread the pain out, we will sort of mitigate people losing everything they have. We don't need a high number of foreclosures. Foreclosures have been on a 90-day. They're going to be put on the shelf for 90 days, but we don't want people to come out of it in worse condition than they were when they came in.
And Brother Fatin, on Resurrection Day, to channel our dear Brother HAFEEZ, Brother HAFEEZ would certainly talk about this being a moral issue. And this is a moral issue. And as Brother Adams just said, we have to look at people who aren't able to work at this point, who by obviously no fault of their own are in a serious financial bind and financial strain. Larry pointed out Canada, they're providing every citizen of Canada $2,000 at least for the next 3 months. And they're talking about doing that beyond until economically somehow this can level off when people aren't in these economic strains that they're currently in. And so we are looking at this from an ethical issue, but this is a moral issue. And as Brother Eric said, we have to look at what we're doing and how history will look back on what we did as people are losing lives, not just from Corona, but from the byproduct, as Bobby said, and the effects of not having the health insurance, not having the food, not having the necessary sustenance that they need to survive today.
We're gonna have a tsunami of evictions and foreclosures if we don't have a not just a moratorium on mortgages and rent payment. We should have a forgiveness or cancellation of mortgage payments and rents. Because even if, and I agree, don't get me wrong, I agree with the moratorium, but I'm telling you, when those 90 days are up, look, there are landlords right now who, even after the governor has said and the mayor has said people shouldn't be evicted, they're still trying to evict people. We're going to have in 4 months a tsunami of evictions and foreclosures if we don't just have a moratorium. We must move to mortgage and rent cancellation, or else we're going to have Hoovervilles. We got them now. We got camps of homeless people now. Even in New Jersey, there's a camp right now of homeless people. They camp by the Passaic River. We have to deal with this situation head on. Bobby talked about the supply chain. Bobby talked about FDR. You know what FDR did? He nationalized everything. He was nationalizing so much that the steel industry took FDR to court on the nationalization. We need to nationalize. The nurses right now are calling for the nationalization of our hospitals. The nurses and the doctors right now are calling for the nationalization of the supply chain that produces the PPEs and the medicines that we need. We have to go beyond these piecemeal in-place solutions. We need systemic change. We need Medicare for all in this country.
I just come back to one other thing that Larry has said, again, to support his belief that what Trump is doing with the post office is all about politics and trying to suppress voting. Because if you recall the previous 2 years, who was he attacking? Jeff Bezos from Amazon. And he kept talking about how Amazon had preferential rates
Right.
that U.S. Postal Service, and we should be having everything go through the U.S. Postal Service. So he was supportive of the Postal Service when he was against Jeff Bezos. But now, nothing's changed with Jeff Bezos last time I checked. But what's changed right now? We're coming closer to the presidential election, and you have this mail-in voting that all of a sudden certain red states are talking about, oh, well, we're not big fans of it, even though it has been Alaska, as an example, which is the reddest of red states. They've been doing mail-in voting for years with no issues. They actually are able to continue to elect local Republicans in there. And by the way, Trump himself has used mail-in voting
in Florida.
So, he again, watch the politics of it. Everything this man does is self-centered for himself, and for him to not support the U.S. Postal Service and, as Eric, you started off, essential workers is atrocious.
Bobby, let me just say, he attacked Jeff Bezos not because he looked at Amazon as having a monopoly or he was supportive of the U.S. Postal Service. He attacked Jeff Bezos because Jeff Bezos is the owner of the Washington Post.
Yes.
Not like the coverage that the Washington Post is providing, and he saw that as a means to attack, by proxy, the Washington Post.
Yeah.
So, two things that are crucial, and as I hear you, brothers, and even Sister Tamika, one, we must be clear that after the actual flatten of the curve, as they use the terminology, when that happens, all of the reading I'm showing is that coronavirus is going to leave a devastating impact. There may be some brain damage. There may be some permanent damage to a person's lungs. We don't know the long-term impact of coronavirus. It's not just that, okay, my fever broke, I'm no longer, I'm breathing heavy, I'm fine. That is not the truth. The truth is the studies are showing that the long-term impact of coronavirus is going to be here a while. And lastly, the definition of pre-existing conditions, diabetes, heart disease, asthma, all of the pre-existing conditions, those criteria, they're all preventable and reversible. They're connected to our food. And we have to engage in a real conversation how this slave-like diet that we have continued throughout our histories. Our mothers and fathers are having heart disease, not because it's in their DNA, it's in their dinner. You know, everyone knew I was diabetic, lost my sight, nerve damage, was going to lose my fingers and toes. I had to make real decisions. And we need to now get in a real conversation about getting this junk food out of our communities, stop serving it to our children. Over 70% of 12-year-olds have early signs of heart disease. Let that number resonate for a while.
Right.
You know, the diabetes among children is actually going through the roof. You know, we don't have high blood pressure because it's hereditary. We have high blood pressure because the food we eat feeds and create high blood pressure. When I went in for my diabetes diagnosis, they told me, well, don't worry, your kidney is failing. It runs in the Black community. No, it doesn't. Fried damn chicken runs in our community.
That's right.
And all of this poison that's in our community. I'm encouraging our people to start re-examining the poison that we are feeding ourselves, feeding our children, and how it is causing the health crises that we have in our community. And that is why in our community, we have junk food, and you go to other communities, they have whole food. You find the same track where coronavirus is taking lives. It's the same track where you have McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, chicken wings and fried rice, jerk this, jerk that. Food is killing us. And I would be remiss if I didn't put that conversation into how are we going to recover. Right now, people should be stop smoking. They should go to a healthy diet to rebuild our immune system and strengthen it so that we won't be a host for viruses that are to come. This coronavirus is one of many viruses that are going to be hitting us. This is the new norm. This is not every 200 years is a new virus. No, scientists have told us that we're going to be getting superbugs, viruses. This is the new norm, and we better be ready for it.
Eric, let me ask you this. Now, this is very interesting, that who do folks, and I discussed last night with Brother Eric, and I can mention is dealing with my daughter. I can't mention her job right now. But if she didn't speak up, you know, and she's in an essential job. Just her ID she don't even need a letter. Her ID presents that she's an essential employee, but they was not social distancing there. Then there was a person that was infected with the coronavirus, but they didn't tell them where the person worked. They didn't have to tell who the person was, but what floor. They had to find out, come to find out it was on my daughter's floor. But it's not just about my daughter. It's about a whole bunch of people. I've heard it from TA workers that someone has tested positive in this garage. They closed down this garage for one day, then that garage is back open. Same thing in the sanitation department. You saw the situation where you had the whistleblower that talked about what was going on at Amazon. Amazon not only fired him, but they were going to put out a smear campaign against him.
Right.
I just spoke with a nurse yesterday. I'm not going to mention the hospital because she's not ready to say this. Eric, and I'm bringing this to your attention now. She says that, you know, when you've been exposed or you've been sick, you've been around somebody with the coronavirus, some hospitals are telling the nurses, instead of 14 days to quarantine yourself for 7 days. What are people, because they feel helpless. They need the jobs because they need the money. A lot of folks don't realize, living in New York City, if you're making over 6 figures, you still may be paycheck to paycheck, and you're not getting a $1,200 stimulus check. What do those folks do? How can they get help when they feel their back is against the wall, when what needs to be done right isn't being done right by their employers?
And that's a great question, brother. Number one, they should definitely pursue I think everyone should be pursuing labor relation, fights. They should be talking to their labor relations. I think lawsuits should be involved. People talk about Trump's knowledge of the coronavirus beforehand and how he was debriefed by the intelligence community. Listen, national politics is one thing, but all politics is local. You know, don't tell me that our local government is not aware of the impact of telling your daughter to go out there without a PPE. Don't tell me that our local government is not aware of those with pre-existing conditions that are likely to die. So the decisions that are being made nationally, and the buffoonery of Trump's policies is no different than the policies we're making right here. To tell nurses to wear the same N95 mask for a week when you have been in an infectious environment, you touching it, putting it in your pocket or putting it in your locker. You know, are you kidding me? You know that this is against all protocol. So number one, our unions, they need to go to their unions. Unions need to really have an organized movement around, you are not putting my employees, my constituency in harm's way, and then they need to file their personal suits. I think there's going to be a host of lawsuits that are going to come out of this, you know, when this is over, but people should be initiating those lawsuits right now and stating, you are putting me in harm's way. The hypocrisy of our policies that is telling people you should stay home, shelter in place, don't go outdoors, but then those who are going outdoors, you're saying we're going to give you nothing to protect you, but we're forcing you to go outdoors. That is just not, that's not making logical sense. You don't have to be an economist or a physician to know it's not logical if you're telling the city, shelter in place, stay indoors, 6 feet a space against you, but then you're telling an employee, go out there and don't be 6 feet placed against you. Like the 9/11 operators, they cramped on top of each other. Transit employees cramped on top of each other. Correction officers. They just came out a report yesterday that when a person sneezes in a supermarket, it goes 2 hours over. So every person that's working in the supermarket that's stocking these shelves are exposing themselves. So we can't say on one breath that one group of people in the city should be protected and another group in the city that we are compelling to go out there. The daughter's compelled to go out there. That nurse is compelled to go out there. That they're not going to be protected. That's hypocrisy in the policy, and you cannot continue to ignore that.
I just want to say what Eric said is interesting. My daughter spoke up. I'm glad that she took after me, you know, and her mom's also. By speaking up, you know, not only her, but her other co-workers now are working at home.
Isn't that something?
Yep.
You know,
the point you made, the LA Times published an article a few days ago. There's a hospital in California where the administrators did not inform some of the staff and nurses that there were other nurses who had tested positive. And so the virus spread amongst the nurses there and other staff members. That is criminally negligent. Now, again, morally, that's reprehensible, but that is criminally negligent when, as a administrative supervisor, you are not informing your other staff members that there are people who are testing positive. And so, as Brother, Eric said, certainly, I think this should be subject to criminal prosecution if you are aware and you are put in a position of leadership at any institution, particularly at hospitals where you have these frontline workers who, as Brother Larry said, who are working tirelessly and putting their lives on the line every day. I'm getting texts from some of my brothers who are correction officers, retired correction officers, and they're sharing stories, man, that are frightening regarding what is going on inside the jails in New York City, but across the country. And so we have so many industries and institutions where we see this, and yet it is not certainly being spoken about widely enough. And to go back to Brother, Eric's point, Sister Karina made this point the other night on the show. Think about the damage that is being done, again, to the survivors' long-term care that is going to be required. And so we have so many people who are being affected by this, who we're assuming are recovering, but their recovery is just that's nominally. They are going to have health issues for years to come. That's right.
And when all else fails, workers should strike. When workers' lives are being put in danger, hospital workers, transportation workers, lives are being put in danger and they're not getting any resolution, then they need to engage in a job action. They need to engage in a strike. Then management listens. These people are dying. People are not listening because they don't think there's any consequence to pay. And it's time for labor in this country to start standing up and fighting for workers like their lives are really on the line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you. But this is, you know, so many people are just being affected by this, and so many people are trying to get by. But Eric, how do folks have this conversation with their landlord, where their landlord, you know, is, for instance, those that live in private houses? There's one thing to live in nature, but what those that are living in private homes where the landlord is on the premise, are these landlords giving this? Is this three here in New York City? Is this 3-month moratorium for them dealing with mortgage? Is this in place?
That's a great question. Number one, it will actually be a law for the return of your month security month in advance. That's one part of it. We already have in place a 3-month moratorium on eviction. That's already in place. You know, there will be no evictions in the city in the next 3 months. Right now, there is a moratorium on mortgage for 1- and 2-family houses. I think it should be extended, because it would be unfair to tell our small property owners, you have a 4-family house. It would be unfair to say to them, listen, you don't have to have rent for the next, paid to you for the next 3 months, but you still have to pay your mortgage and your utility bills. That's not fair. You know, there's a lot of, 4-family property owners that this is their life savings, and to go 3 months without having anyone paying any rent, and you still paying mortgage and utilities, that is a real burden on them. And we don't want to continue to push the burden on them. Oftentimes, when people think of landlords, they think of the ones that own hundreds and thousands of units of properties. But there are everyday small 1- and 4-family landlords that are really eking it out every month, trying to make a living in their, their life savings is in their homes. We need to never forget them and don't sweep them into the entire conversation of the term of landlords. And many of them are doing the right thing. Many of these small landlords that live in the brownstone and renting out 3 units, they have a real relationship with their tenants, and they don't try to hit them over the head, and they'll try to make sure that they're displaced, because it's a lose-lose scenario. A solid tenant that is paying their rent every month and allowing you to sustain your life, that's a real relationship, one-on-one relationship. And so the call is to make sure, in unison with a 3-month moratorium on rent, you also have the moratorium on mortgage payments and utility payments. Con Ed's, National Grid, our gas companies, it's time for them to give in. They go every year and a few years and get increases. This is the time for everyone to give in, to make sure we sustain the city and make sure we sustain even the state and the country, to be honest with you.
You know, Fatim, I know we're closing, going to be closing shortly, but, just to, again, I bring it back up to the federal level, which is, it is a known fact that this U.S. economy is primarily driven by small businesses.
Yes.
Whether it is that homeowner who, they're a small business owner as well. And so while the government scrambled to make money available, they did a piss poor job of actually getting the money into the hands of small business owners. Mm-hmm. And, we've always talked about the banks, and, banks are ready to extend the loans, and the government made it so that they're government-backed loans. So you have a distribution channel of the banks, but to my earlier point about supply chains, federal government had no idea how to give clear directions to banks so that banks know actually how to administer the loans. It's still messy out there. So this next round of money that they're talking about, one of the proposals is to allow the community banks to be a part of it, because not all banks right now are part of it. So, Eric, as you talk about that home, that landlord who owns a house, or a 3-unit house or whatever, chances are they have a relationship with their community bank. And community banks, that's the beauty of a community bank. They actually know the people. We talk about community policing, where you got community banks, and they have these relationships. But now the federal government's not allowing community banks to participate in distributing the funds to it. So if you're really, to your point, Larry, if you're really trying to take care of the people, there are so many better ways that the federal government could organize it. But because we have the commander in lies that's going on in there, who has bankrupted his company numerous times, and he has not filled his positions with people with substance and knowledge, but blind loyalty, it's no surprise that we have this kind of cluster F.
Bobby, what is the reticence or reluctance to allow these community banks, and as you said, who have relationships with the people in the community, to help in the distribution of the funds?
Because they've never really allowed community banks to participate in a lot of federal programs. And so instead of revisiting those views, they're just, well, you know, let me go with the bigger banks out there, because the bigger banks, those are the ones that, you know, we can rely on. But you need all the banks in there, because not every citizen likes, you know, they trust big banks, right? Some of them trust their local bank around the corner, right? And years, you know, growing up for years, Carver Bank, you know, the black-owned bank in Harlem, was a community bank that just, you know, it just lost its way.
Right. I just want to jump out here real quick, because I know we have about 8 minutes. Eric, the city, you know, it just came up this week. We having numerous deaths out here. The amount of death where the morgues, the hospital morgues, cannot hold it. You cannot get into the funeral homes are backed up. And there were questions first thrown at the mayor dealing with mass burials. How do loved ones, how do they deal with this? And what is the city doing with their loved ones? Because this is not a number. Those that are not affected, it's a number to them. But this is their loved ones. And, you know, so how are they dealing with, and how do they deal with getting their loved ones buried? And if there's so many folks that have perished due to this COVID-19, where are they putting the bodies until the loved ones can get them and take care of them?
That's so powerful, brother, and it's well said, because although that this is a news headline and it's a story and it's stats, the reality, we're talking about individuals and the trauma that one could experience, number one, of not being able to see their loved one prior to them transitioning, is something that you would carry the rest of your life. You know, if you have a son, a daughter, and, you know, they pass away and you're not seeing them, the last time you saw them is when you rolled them into the hospital and you can't visit them. They're in a nursing home. The number of cases in a nursing home where bodies have decomposed because they've been in a nursing home so long. Just the undignified way of dealing with COVID-19 could have long-term mental impact. And so there's a couple of things that are happening. The mayor has not really laid out the clear plan on how they're going to deal with these large number of deaths. Remember, we were on the average day, non-premature death, we get about 40 a day. And to now get these numbers into the hundreds, just a system of dealing with this volume of deaths is something that the infrastructure is not ready for. So some are still sitting on ice, some are still sitting in trucks and trailers, others are sitting inside the morgues of the hospitals. With, you know, the conversation about body bags. How do you properly retain these bodies? So they're looking at, part of the conversation I'm hearing is the potentiality of looking at Hart Island as a location. Some people are cremating their family members also, but we need to clearly have a more humane way of having families deal with the loss of their loved ones. If you have a funeral parlor and your family member passes away, you could get the death certificate and you could immediately turn it over to the funeral parlor to do the burial. You're not allowed to do the wakes. You're not allowed to do the other formal things that we do when you lose a loved one. What we are doing at Borough Hall, we're doing this. My office, we have opened a Zoom account where we are telling people, if you have a loved one and they transition, you can let us know and you could hold some type of digital wake where you're able to invite your family from all over the country or the globe, where they can come on and you have an opportunity to have either a private wake, or we're also having a series of public wakes. Like we're going to do a public wake for Roy Hastic. I spoke with his daughters yesterday. He has a couple of 100 people who want to come out and show him, really memorialize his life. And so we're allowing people to do this because you have to adjust to the desire to be around friends and family, to laugh, to cry, to talk about the life, and at the same time, understand how important it is not to create an environment where you'll lose more lives because of our behaviors and action. And so we're encouraging people, if they have access to WebEx, to Zoom, to Google Hangout, use all of these methods to give people an opportunity to give dignity to this transition. Because if someone dies and all you heard is that, you know, Miss Jones died and nothing was done to really pay tribute to the life, that is really harmful. I would not want that to happen to anyone that I know, and we continue to use technology to do so. And I'm encouraging people to do the same, or they can reach out to my office and use our Zoom account to, you know, show respect for their loved ones.
You know, I am, what you described, Eric, is what I'm actually going through right now. So I'm able to get my system, still working on my niece, but into a funeral home, but they're so backed up that passed on April 6th, able to have a service for until April 27th. And that is backed up they are. And yes, she's being stored in the hospital. You know, they can't do autopsies at this point. You know, we do a cremation, and the service is limited, right? So we can't have more than 10 family members at the service out there. So we are looking in, you know, so the funeral home is in the Bronx. They've been good, but, you know, we're looking to use a virtual one so that we can allow other family members and friends to participate in it. But, you know, it'll be, by the time I get a chance to see my sister, my niece's body, it will be close to 7 weeks since the last time I was.
Oh, Bobby, we sorry, boss.
That's powerful. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, Fatih, you said something earlier, you know, regarding Brother HAFEEZ, and you know, as men, sometimes you know we hold our emotions in. We feel that we have to be, you know, tough, and you know we have to, I guess, put on in many ways the facade, you know, the appearance of being strong. But you know, in many ways, sometimes vulnerability is a strength. And I will say this, you know, when Bobby informed me his sister Kelly, who was my dear friend for over 40 years, I mean, I was driving, man. I pulled over and I broke down and I just cried, you know. And you know, for me, man, it was just, you know, in many ways, it just allowed me in my own way to grieve. Again, not, you know, as Bobby said, being able to see her, or the service is not going to be for weeks, you don't know. And so just, you know, I say to all brothers out there watching, man, this is, you know, these are anxious and very trying times for all of us, man. And, you know, as Black men, men of color, men, period, you know, we can't be afraid to show our emotions, because you hold that in and then you realize, man, that, you know, it's unhealthy. About the physical, you know, Brother Eric said, eating well, you know, getting your immune system up. If you could get out to the park, I try to get out in the park, you know, certainly social distance, exercising, just to keep the immune system up, but also, you know, to keep your spirits and mentally stay strong, man, because again, this stuff could be, you know, it could become pinned up and then you don't even realize it. And then you compromise your immune system because of the stress that you're dealing with.
That's right. Well said. Well said.
There you go. I know we got to get ready to end. Brother Eric, you know, I know you see a lot of folks, you know, with these conspiracy theories out here about certain things, but, you know, I want an investigation going, because there's been folks that have passed, before this became a pandemic, with certain symptoms that are similar or the same as COVID-19 out here. I know when Puffy's children's mother passed, and that was a year, I was in 2018. When she passed, Kim Porter, you know, she had these symptoms. And again, it may not have been COVID-19. Again, I don't know. But I just think that there needs to be an investigation, because I remember when, before 9/11, Open Line did a show on how to deal with chemical and biological warfare in New York City if anthrax was used and utilized in the subway system. And if it's put in the subway system, it is spread in those 4 boroughs real quick. And I remember the OEM, you know, contacting Bob Slade and myself and saying, why were we creating a panic? We wasn't creating a panic. We were just saying that we need to be prepared for any type of attack, and especially the Black community. Because when it comes down to the Black community, as we're seeing now, we're least prepared. We're least prepared in a lot of areas. Our health are challenged, and we are starting to see the fallout from this. And I think that we have to be smarter. There's some things that we can put on government, but there's some things that we have to put on ourselves. Like you said, when you became diabetic and certain things you were facing, you made a choice. When you came to that fork in the road, you made a choice. You was going to go right instead of left. You understand? So we all have to look in the mirror and make certain choices. And sometimes those choices are hard. But once you make the right choice and you get into a routine, you'll start to see they're not as hard as you think they were. You know, so.
And we cannot say enough about you, brother. Even when Brother Slade was with us prior to his transitioning, Open Line, for I don't know how many years it has been. It has to be, you know,
30 years, brother.
Yes, where you have been just bringing information to the people. And there used to be a brother that was a expert. I don't know if he's with the feds, but
we had Tyrone Powers, former FBI, and then Eitan Edwards, the International Preparedness Network. Those are our two guys.
And people don't remember those days. And part of what is needed right now is that those of us who have experience in these various areas, we need to be part of the preparation for our community. You know, Lou Rawls used to tell us, send money to United Negro College Fund. The goal was for us to come back and really prepare our communities, you know, through the Du Bois talented theory. And so those of us who are medical professionals, economists, disaster preparedness, you know, all of these things that we have expertise, we should not retire and leave that information, that wealth of knowledge. By using this venue of what you're doing today, you've been on this for several days, several weeks. You know, some of us were sitting down a few weeks ago, and what you have been doing, brother, is just remarkable. And, you know, those who have listened to the show and taken away some of the tips and information that you have given them, it's, you know, it's almost an unsung hero that you are doing. We cannot thank you enough. And I don't want this show to go off without me acknowledging what you have done for so many years of using the power of your microphone to empower people. And this is just another level of the empowerment that you have done. And that team, that whole team that's there, they may not be in front, we don't see their faces, but you remove this station and your activism on the airwaves, you remove it from the conversation, we'll be having a different conversation, and we probably have more deaths than we're seeing in our community. So thank you. And thank all of you brothers that are here for what you're doing every day. You know, this is a battle, and let's continue to fight on.
Appreciate that, Brother Eric. And like Bob Slade said, and he would quote the late Congressman Adam Clayton Powell and Pastor, what is in your hand, utilize what's in your hand. And with this platform, we thank folks and we thank the people at the station for allowing us to bring this information to the forefront. And as Bob Slade always said about passing the baton, he's not here. And I stay in touch with Brother Mtume and Attorney Bob Pickett. And it's about passing the baton and connecting the dots. So as long as I have this platform and breath in my body, I will continue to bring this type of information. And boy, you just open up a can of worms. I don't know if they're ready for Tyrone Powers, but I am going to reach out to him later today. And I guess what? He might have some information that folks are not ready for. So, you know, listen up. I just want to also thank you all for making yourself available. Eric, when I call on you, you're always there. Our panel, Larry, Jamie, Bobby, during this time is just commendable that you all make this commitment. You already know the situation with what happens behind the scenes, but you still come forward to make this happen every week. Now we are extending this platform right now, and during this crisis that we are adding a show during the middle of the week, and we will be on to the folks that don't know. We'll be back on this Wednesday on Facebook Live via Zoom at 8 p.m. and hopefully we'll be going about 2 hours. So we want to thank you all out there, and I thank you. And Brother Eric, thank you. I want to thank Tamika Mallory. Is there any last words real quick, gentlemen?
Brother, just so we can do this, I don't know which one of you said it, but I thought it was powerful that this is not only a physical journey, but it's a spiritual journey. And some of us are going to come through this with some serious traumatic PTSD. And I want to encourage, sisters do this already all the time. I want to encourage us to reach out and just grab 10 brothers we know every week and do this. Get on and just talk to each other, check in. How are you doing? Did you lose anyone? Let's pray together. Let's meditate together. We've been doing a series of meditation with, some brothers that I know. But I want to encourage us just to reach out to 10 other Black men, because no one pulls over on the side of the road and help a Black man that broke down unless he's another Black man. And we need to uplift each other. A lot of us are, even if we do cyber exercising in the house, let's find ways to use this moment of reconnecting ourselves with each other. And so I want to encourage that we just connect. I connected with 10 brothers the other day. I just called them up and said, listen, can you just get on this Zoom? And we just talk to each other. Some of them lost loved ones. Some of them were going through coronavirus and they were locked in their rooms. But, we got to help each other through this, because we often say, listen, man up, just handle this, suffer silently. But that suffering is actually destroying your body, and it is dismantling your immune system, and is making you more susceptible to diseases and all of the things that we're facing as Black men. So Black men, I'm putting that out there, reach out to the brothers that you know, and just spend some time. It could be your son and your son. This is a good opportunity for all of us to introduce our sons to their sons, to have this next generation, and just start telling some of the stories of what we've done and how we've got here. So I just want to encourage Black men. Other folks are going to do this, but Black men have a tendency to isolate themselves when they're going through a crisis. We need each other now more than ever, and I'm encouraging you to reach out to brothers you know and bring them into this fold of let's talk to each other.
All right. I just want to leave you with these words here. It's, Brother Eric, by you saying that, my daughter wrote something the other day. She said, is it just me, or has anyone else been feeling really uneasy lately? Like it's almost unexplainable, but your body feels nervous all the time and constant fatigue. My response, I responded to my daughter, and I said that this is heightened anxiety that your body, mind, and spirit are feeling that is causing this uneasiness. You may feel this consciously or subconsciously. A lot of folks think that they are under control, but in your subconscious, you are a nervous wreck. That's why mind exercise, such as meditation, yoga, and sincere prayer, not just mimicking words, can still the mind and the soul, which can alleviate some or all of that nervousness feeling that you and others are experiencing. That's what I wrote to my daughter the other day on Facebook. She's right in the other room. When I said the other room at the house, when I wrote that to her. And I decided to share that when you just said that a lot of folks, and we need this camaraderie here. And I agree with you. And that's why I decided, instead of saying some words that I repeat every week, I decided to share that with you. And I leave you with those words there. Bobby Childs, you're here, brother. I give you the last.
Thank you all. And, for everyone, all our viewers out there, thank you for your warm wishes and condolences during this period that my family is going through. You know, as Bob always said, get your mind right. And this was a week where I really had to get my mind right. The sudden shock of hearing about my sister, it threw me for a loop. And everything you just said, Fatim, in terms of anxiety and things, I mean, I went through all of that, the flood of memories growing up together. She was my younger sister. So it took me a while to get right. And just being able to talk about it and coming on has been very therapeutic for me. So I just want to thank you, the station, for giving us the platform, the viewers for listening, tuning in, and just sharing, right? You know, I know my niece, myself, and my remaining family, we will heal. And we just draw upon faith and belief and all the great memories that we had of my sister and my niece out there. So yes, as we always say, get your mind right and keep a good thought. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Eric. Thank you, Tamika Mallory. All right, everybody, take care.